to Starcraft Support the Maker. Today we have gone global. And we have the lovely ladies joining us from Crochet Between Worlds. At the top of your screen, you can see Anne, and Anne is in the Netherlands. And Michelle, on the bottom of your screen, is in Sydney, Australia. How did you meet?
Oh, Anna, you take this one.
Well, there were pens involved.
Oh.
But it was 2002, something like that. So actually we went to the same high school in Germany for some time, or rather it was my high school. And Michelle came over, well, for a year, for an exchange year. And I think the first day you came, I had my favorite pants on, which were patchwork pants, weren't they?
So cool. Corduroy multicolored patchwork pants. They were seriously still the coolest pants I have ever seen in my life. So
we're still trying to recreate them because of course I was young. How old were we? 16, 17, something like that.
Yeah.
So the pants I'm pretty sure I wouldn't fit into them either. But yeah, so Michelle saw the pants, and I think you said something like, I have to get to know her. And I was also rather interested from people from abroad. So it was a cool year. Then that's how we met, long time ago.
So were you both crocheting then?
Not me.
No?
I could crochet. My grandmother taught me when I was 5 or 6, and I'd made blankets and whatever. When we really got into crocheting when Anna came to spend a year in Australia to do a master's at a university close to where my family lived. What year was that? 2005?
No, 2008.
2008. See, this has been
time flies.
And we had a filthy hot summer. It was one of those really sticky, horrible Australian summers where it was 40 degrees and humid every day. And so we sat inside with the air conditioning on and the curtains closed. And I think we watched the whole 7 seasons of The West Wing and taught
a couple of cooking shows and so on. So heaps of stuff,
yeah, it was you know, going swimming late at night because that was the only time you could actually go outside without melting into a puddle, and we had so much fun just hanging out and crocheting together.
So how soon after that did you decide to start the blog? Presumably, Anna, you went back to Germany?
Yeah, much later, I think around 2012, 2013. So both of us kept crocheting, and of course we stayed in contact, we talked daily. But back then it was mostly granny squares because I had not yet discovered the wonders of crochet online. And then at some point I stumbled across a couple of blogs and I did a bit of extra crochet, but I think then we found a big crochet group on Facebook, the two of us, didn't we?
Yeah, the Creative Crochet Crew, which was mostly run by a group of Australian ladies, it was huge and awesome, and unfortunately had to close down because people being people just made it impossible to actually do anything nice anymore. But for the time that it was around, it was incredible, and it sort of inspired us and like, well, maybe we do have something to offer in this space. And so that's always been our focus, that doing blogging should always be something that we want to do rather than something we have to do, and also something that's fun for us.
And so what sort of things do you cover on the blog?
Anything?
Yeah, whatever's happening. Anna, you tend to write more about your local area and the adventures that you're having, and I tend to write more about patterns that I'm working on or projects that I've been doing. I did a couple of series with the Starcraft crochet alongs. The first few I helped proofread the patterns, I also did, along with the releases for each part of the crochet along, my tips and tricks for how I best managed each part, which was really enjoyable to do. And yeah, I really liked doing that. I should get back into it.
but that's so useful, isn't it? All those tips and tricks that that experts like you. I'm not a very good crocheter, but blogs like yours I find absolutely invaluable. So your blogs something that all levels of crocheters would find interesting or useful, do you think? It's not just for experts, is it?
Oh, definitely.
To have a lot of tutorials on there, because at some point when we came across techniques and we couldn't find a tutorial which worked for us, sometimes we wrote one up. For example, the foundation chain. I will never ever be able to live without it again, and I'm always very sad when there's none. So I made sure that Michelle's new blanket have it. So we have a tutorial for that.
For people that don't know, what's a foundation chain?
Well, when you start a blanket and you start that white thing with the chains,
yes.
I always find it incredibly tricky to crochet into the chains, because it gets twisted, and then if you're like me and you miscount a lot, and then you get to the end and you just did 120 bloody stitches, and then you realize that you're missing one or you have too many, and then you have to undo everything. So there is a foundation stitch which literally works up that first row. So it looks like you have a row of single crochet, double crochet, half double crochet in there, but you work it stitch by stitch, which means when you come to the end, you have the first row and you don't actually need to crochet into it, and you can just add one if you miscounted.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, I like the sound of that.
It's not something we invented, but we looked at so many different tutorials and videos and just didn't get it. And we thought we're not that dumb. Like, we're both pretty good crocheters. It can't be that hard. So we puzzled it out, and then we were like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Anna said, you have to write it up and take pictures of how you figured it out. So even now, like, if it's been a while, I go back to my own tutorial to remember like how to do it. Because it's weird until you get the hang of it, and then, but it beats the hell out of crocheting into chains.
And if you start using it, I think you will never be able to use it. Or don't use it afterwards. It's just one of these things you need in your crochet life.
Yeah,
like the magical circle is same thing. So when I discovered that, it's like, oh my god, this is brilliant. And so this is what we need. But I think a lot of our patterns, or the things we have on our blog next to our chit-chatty things we have on the blog, because we also use the blog to share things between the two of us, at least in the first couple of years when internet connections were not that good. We could also upload things I wanted to see Michelle to see to the blog, and then of course everybody else could see it as well, but it was also sharing medium between the two of us.
So it's like a conversation between you.
Yeah, that at least at the beginning, was a bit like that. And I think with a lot of our patterns, because you asked earlier, so is it just for expert? I think the idea behind most of our patterns is there must be an easier way, or this should not be hard. So even if some of our patterns look complicated, we always try to have them as easy as possible while looking complicated. And for example, I hate needles, like not hooks, but sewing things together. So when I do amigurumi, it always looks horrible. So at some point we got to the point where we said, we have to figure out a way to make it in one piece instead of having several pieces of things. That's the idea behind a lot of things.
Yeah, that's so clever. That's so clever. So how did you then get into designing?
And mostly Michelle.
Well, that's the thing. We either looked for something that we wanted a pattern for and couldn't find it. Well, then okay, clearly, if I'm gonna make it, may as well have a pattern to it. Or we went looking for something and the pattern was so complex or difficult or complicated when it didn't seem to need to be, that we could do it a better way. So taking the same sort of idea but doing it differently. We've also done a couple of pattern translations into English from or Anna has, from other languages, from French.
And English to German,
French to German, which has been really interesting as well. So, but yeah, that's most of our pattern inspiration is either why doesn't this exist, or why is this so hard?
Which is the first one you designed?
Oh my goodness, our first pattern. Yeah, I remember my very first pattern. I'm pretty sure it was my first pattern was a set of wrist warmers. Now I'm not a small person, and I could not get crochet wrist warmers that weren't baggy around my wrist and tight like here, or they didn't fit here, or they just drove me nuts. I'm like, right, there must be a way to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I did figure it out, but then in figuring it out, I realized if you had different sized arms, all you have to do is take some measurements and change these bits and it would fit you perfectly. It doesn't have to be something that just fits me perfectly. And so I was like, oh, well, let's do it. And so that's still my most downloaded pattern on Lovecrafts is the chunky fitted wrist warmers, which, like, if I went back and looked at it now, years later, it would probably be hideously embarrassing to see what it looked like and how I wrote it, because obviously we've developed our style and experience since then. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the very first pattern that I actually wrote up. And
is it mainly accessories or blankets, or what are your favorite things to design?
Whatever pops into our mind.
We haven't done many clothes, just because fitting clothes, particularly with adults, is so hard and you can't make 9,000 sizes. And whenever I've tried to make clothes from other people's designs, it seems to work perfectly if you're a size 10. And other than that, they've just changed the maths and not necessarily worked it up. So
Right.
It never worked out. But kids' clothes are fun.
Oh, look at that.
So I was looking up jumper patterns for my 2-year-old, because she really needed some jumpers, but not cutesy cardigans. And I needed something that was easy to make and easy to wash. And I found this ancient pattern for a hexagon cardigan. So it's actually two very wobbly hexagons, which you can sort of see under the arm.
Oh, yes.
That you make two and then sew them together and end up with a jumper.
That's
but
so
again,
cool.
I read a whole pile of patterns and I made the hexagons, and then it said, and now stitch together the arm seam. And do you think I could figure out which one was the arm seam? I had absolutely no clue what to do with my 2 hexagons.
I still remember the chat we had about that when you sent pictures. Like, I can't figure this out. I have all these pieces and it looks like black.
And it's like these wobbly hexagons. I'm like, this will never be a jumper, whatever. My sister can see in 3 dimensions. She was fortunately around at the time and walked past and said, oh, you just fold it like this, and did some magic. And then all of a sudden it was half a jumper. And I was like, okay, you have to show me how to do that again, because there's no way I'll be able to replicate that. I'm not a spatial person. I'm a maths and calculating and writing person. So, but so after we figured out that you don't even have to worry about thinking about it, because the trick is you don't cut off at the end of the hexagon here. You keep going to make the sleeve, and then it's really obvious where this seam is, because
I see.
So you don't even have to think, and that's sort of well, that's our design philosophy. How can we make it so that you don't have to try and wrestle with, you know, bits of fabric and pieces and either try and stitch them together in a way that looks good, or figure out which seams have to go together, or where exactly you have to put that stitch.
Can you hold it up again? Can you hold it up again for us so we can see? I can kind of see. Yeah. And what's the yarn?
This is the Starcraft Regatta, so it's the cotton acrylic.
Oh yes.
And this one, I just grabbed it out of my daughter's drawer before I came in here, and it's been through the washing machine and the dryer about 50 times.
Wow.
And you wouldn't even know.
That looks fantastic. Does the pattern have a name yet?
It's called the Impossible Sweater. Because when you start making it, it looks like it will never be a sweater, and you can possibly not figure out. And then as soon as you make the arm extensions, there it is. It appears in front of you.
Oh, no, I might have a go at that. And what sizes? Do you know what sizes it's going to come in?
Yep. So it's coming in sizes 0 to 3.
And if people want to see it worn, if you scroll back a couple of, well, probably months on our Instagram feed, and we have a couple of pictures of Ellie wearing it.
Super.
Yeah.
Well, that's something to
And
look forward to.
Yeah, no, it's really, I've had the patterns written up, and I've made heaps. Ali has about 6 of them, and I've fortunately got to make some in all of the sizes to check, you know, whether they actually fit, because that was really important to me, that I wasn't just fixing the maths and then calling it that size without actually checking it. So a friend of mine had a 3-year-old. We could check the size 3 size, and it fits him perfectly, no problem. So there's a jumper version which is like this one, and there's also a cardigan version which doesn't have this center panel, so it's just open in the middle. If you want cardigans that you don't have to pull over a recalcitrant toddler's head.
But I also happen to know you have another pattern coming up, because we've been talking about it for a while, and I can see it behind Anne.
Yeah, it's hiding just down there.
And it's called, and I'm going to let you say what it's called, because I get it wrong all the time. Go on.
So that one's the Bargello wave throw. Anna came to visit with her husband, which was so much fun. We had such a good time. And for a wedding present for them, my mum and I had made them a quilt for their bed, using our absolute favorite patchwork pattern, which is called the Bargello wave. Now, Bargello is a needlepoint technique originally, and what it does is it creates these amazing shapes and curves, all by keeping the height of a block the same and changing the width. If all of the blocks were the same width, it would just be diagonal stripes. It's just, so then that's a kind of Bargello. You can leave all the blocks the same width and have diagonal stripes.
And a bit of space here. Yeah.
However, by changing the width of the block, you can create these waves. So I tried to do one in like mini granny squares ages ago. That's called the twist and turn Bargello, which was awesome fun to put together, but way too many ends with all of those tiny squares. And so we made this quilt, and we thought, surely we should be able to do this in crochet. Surely this is one of those things that should be able to be done. So how do we do it? So it took a lot of development to figure out how to do it, because because crochet stitches naturally are all the same height. So it should be therefore easy to change the width of the block. But unfortunately, crochet stitches are not very high. So there's not a lot of options to go much narrower. And so it was a bit complicated to figure out the maths. So the first one that we did was a square baby blanket, which uses double crochet, and it's our most popular pattern on Ravelry by a margin of about 10.
Called?
Bargello baby wave blanket, or Bargello wave baby blanket. I should know that. And it's so we did that first, and it's single rows of double crochet or treble crochet in UK terms, and it was good. But crochet being what it is, if we'd made it any bigger, it would have lent even further to the right.
Okay.
Because in crochet, the stitches don't sit directly on top of each other. They always sit slightly to the right. So if it had been any bigger, it would have looked really skewed, because you just can't, it just won't do what you want it to do. With some pretty aggressive blocking, we got it square, and anyone else making it would probably never notice, but I'm a perfectionist. So that's where we started. And then we thought, well, how do we fix this? And people were asking us, I want it on my couch. I want to have it as a lap blanket. We're thinking, well, we can't just make it bigger. We can't just use the same pattern and make it bigger. We have to figure out how to redevelop it. So the one that Anna's got there has not just a single row of stitches, but 3 rows. And
Right.
that gave us a lot more options to firstly make it bigger. It also made a big difference to the twist.
Yeah,
It kept it straighter.
without
Because,
blocking. Yeah.
yeah, because you work one side and then the other side and then back again.
Right.
A third of the rows fix the twist, which makes it straight. And it also gave us more options for managing the waves so that we could have really narrow blocks and really wide ones, and then the square ones were about in the middle rather than being on the smaller end of the math. So like, as Anna's husband looked at the quilt that we gave them for a wedding present, he says, "This is just applied mathematics." I'm like, it is. That's exactly right. It's applied mathematics.
That's so cool. It must have taken you ages to work it out.
It did, but once we got the logic straight, then it worked out pretty well. So that's the 3-row version. Anna's also been working on an amazing queen size bed quilt version. So a blanket that's big enough and snuggly enough to have as a bed quilt.
Two strands of yarn at the same time. This one has one strand of yarn, the one which is hiding downstairs because at the moment it's in a naughty corner. It has ends.
I was going to ask, knowing how you feel about ends.
Yes, ends and I make.
How do you actually crochet? This isn't all blocks that you have to sew together, is it?
No, it's worked corner to corner, but all in the same direction. So you don't change directions and go back. You finish the row and then you start again with the next row, and work it that way. So,
but yeah, this is a small one. This is a baby one.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
It has the waves. But
people are going to have so much fun with colours, doing different colours, aren't they?
And that's one of the reasons why we ended up using the Starcraft Special DK to make it, because not only like does it wash really well, which is so important for blankets, but there's so many colours that you can actually get a proper gradient, which is
right.
The really typical thing from Bargello is that you can just have random colours and you can have rainbow colours, but one of the things that makes the wave look so effective is to have a gradient in one colour, usually 2 colours. We've made a quilt with 3 and it started to look too busy. 2 seems to be perfect. One's slightly narrower, so you can see in Anna's blanket she's got, I think you've got 6 purples, or 4 purples and 8 pinks or something.
Yeah, 4 purples, 4 red, and then pinkish white.
Yeah. So the idea being that if you have the dark to light in 2 different colours, it really emphasises the bulge and the narrowing of the wave.
We were going to come up with new colourways because that's what we did the last time. And when I was in Australia, we sent our husbands to go shopping and have coffee or something, and took over the living room. And then we had all kinds of color patches there. And Michelle's a lot better with colors, but then, we had them next to each other, and we wanted to come up with a couple of extra ones for the big one. But Corona happened, so it didn't quite work out as we wanted. But of course, we can always consider having competition or something for people.
Yeah.
But we haven't done yet, because since we made these original color patterns, Stylecraft has at least released 6, 8, 10 new colors. So I think some of the blues and purples would actually look perfect in these as the new ones.
Yes, and there's that lovely clementine and daffodil and proper purple, apple and French navy, I think it was.
And I think at some point we also have to have one which has real teal in it, so a blanket pattern, because Michelle and I are both incredibly fond of teal, even though you don't see that here. But yeah.
The regular size, or the lap blanket size one, there's probably going to be a Bargello throw.
Right.
And the queen size bed, we're going to call a Bargello bedspread.
Lovely.
Well, I'm a strong believer in calling it what. Pardon, Anna?
Unless we come up with something cool and fancy.
Which is possible.
To help us out. We're not so good with naming patterns, right? So
we're unfortunately relentlessly practical, which doesn't allow for a lot of flourishes in the naming of things.
Maybe something from applied maths.
Oh, we'll have to ask Alex if he has any good names.
Yeah.
And when you think about other blogs that that you've admired over the years, are there any other blogs that you would go to or for advice or?
Well, I definitely got drawn into the whole blog world with Lucy's Attic 24.
24,
Yeah. And I remember before I realized that you can also get notification when there was a new post, regularly checking if there was something new and getting all excited. So that was in the early 2010s, something like that. So that was definitely, and I also dared to do other things based on her blog. So, and I think in the beginning was mostly that big crochet group. So not necessarily blog, but
yeah. What about you, Michelle?
Well, yeah, Lucy's blog's where I discovered Stylecraft yarn in the first place. So thanks, sucked me into that, which has been so just awesome. And I don't know, I don't tend to follow particular blogs. Like I see people pop up with links on Facebook or Instagram and I go and have a look at what's interesting. I love Sandra from Cherry Heart. Her pictures are always glorious and I wish I could take pictures that beautiful. But in terms of techniques, I tend to just Google until I find something that speaks to me in a way that I can understand. And that's always different kinds of blogs. One pattern that we did a lot of work on a couple of years ago we worked together on a blanket to make for my daughter when she was born, was we used Polly Plum's Stardust Melodies patterns.
Oh, lovely.
And so Anna made half the squares and I made half, and some of the other blog stars and Annabelle from Stylecraft also made a square and posted it over, which was something that was really special, and we still use it every day. It's still around. I mean, in winter, obviously, no one has blankets here in summer. But it's like I had it over my knees just before this. It's such a gorgeous blanket in the Bambino yarn, and it's held up really well with all that use and washing because children are disgusting.
Babies.
Especially babies, but those sorts of, I find her design, Polly Plum's designs really clever in using texture and mathematics to make things that are beautiful and straightforward. There's no trickery to it. It's just it's done in the easiest way it possibly can, and still stunning.
She's incredibly competent with her designing. We did an interview with her, which is on the Stylecraft YouTube channel, and it was just fascinating to hear how she approaches it as well. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Any designers that you follow or that you particularly like their work rather than bloggers?
We also have an Instagram account and we share quite a few of them there.
Do you?
Of course, all the other Stylecraft blog stars. So we're heading up to it because these were the people we're looking for designs anyway. Well,
they're such a talented bunch.
Yes. And I have different, I would call that waves of things. So sometimes I like making blankets. For example, in case that people haven't seen that on our Instagram, last year I really got into the star blanket from, I think it's Celeste Young. And I made like 2,000 of it, but fortunately a lot of my friends also had babies over the last couple of years, so they got star blankets. But for me, there was a phase when we first moved to the Netherlands, and then we moved house within the Netherlands, so I needed a very easy pattern. So that's when I look for these kind of patterns. Then when it gets more complicated, I just go and search for things I like.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily that I say I now have to look for that specific designer. It's more like, I want to make a toy. Let's have a look around.
Yes.
And of course, I think for me, Michelle, is also Heidi Beers, isn't it?
Oh yes, I have made hundreds and hundreds of happy potomi, and they just walk out of my house. I cannot keep one on the shelf.
Except for the captain.
Well, it started with Captain Poprocks, who is still a faithful traveling companion. I should have brought him in here.
I'm
I think
just wondering, I think mine's sitting downstairs.
Is that all the one where they're made out of granny squares?
The African flowers,
okay.
but all different. She uses, it's amazing. She uses all different shapes of African flowers to make the animal. So it's not just hexagons, it's octagons and heptagons and pentagons and squares and triangles.
Wow.
And it's just magic how it comes together that ends up being a hippopotamus or a camel or a pony or a giraffe or whatever. It just blows my mind coming up with that kind of thing. So yeah,
can I do a name check on her again?
Yeah, Heidi Bears.
Heidi Bears. Cool.
And she's got loads of different animals. I think I've made almost all of them. I haven't made the sheep, mostly because no one's asked me for a sheep yet, so I've just avoided it. But I think I can make it. Yeah, so I made a rainbow version of the happy potamus, and a friend of mine's 2-year-old at that point, I think he's 7 or 8 now, scary, named him Captain Poprocks. And so we have adventures. So there's actually a tab on the blog about the adventures of Captain Poprocks, and he came with us to the Great Ocean Road and to Vanuatu and all over the place. And then he split into 2, and now he has a twin, Captain Poprocks, who lives in the Netherlands, who goes on adventures around Europe as well.
Because that's a secret here, because we had a couple of people wondering how we managed that Captain Poprocks, went to London and then they went to Melbourne.
Yeah.
And no, we actually have 2.
My last question to both of you is, can you share a top tip with us? What is your top tip for crochet? But you can have a couple of top tips if you can't decide on one. Learn
the foundation chain.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, she's nicked that from you, Michelle, hasn't she? You were going to say that.
No, but that's it. That would be our 100% our top tip is if you're doing anything that requires a chain to start with, learn how to do the foundation stitches, because they will save you so much time and angst. And if you're not sure how to do them, we have tutorials for single crochet, half double crochet and double crochet on the blog.
I'm not so sure about the double crochet, but I think for the others, but if people want it, we can always make another one. Yeah. And I think the other tip would be learn a stacked stitch. So when you come to the point where you want to close a row, so you have a circle, for example, or you want to start a new one, and usually you get asked to crochet 2 or 3 chains.
Yes.
And what I find that incredibly ugly, because then you often, when you have that circle, it then looks different, and you can definitely see the line.
Yes.
You have that. And I think 2-3 years ago, Michelle introduced me to the stacked stitches. So it's literally 2 single crochets crocheted on top of each other, so it doesn't look exactly like a double crochet, so it's a bit bulkier, but when you see it as a whole, it looks so much better, and often you can't even figure out where you joined. And
I've found it on a blog called, I think it's called Mr. McCorber's Recipe for Happiness, of all the blog titles, and it took me ages to find it again. I thought I dreamed it for a while, but you can do it any stitch. You can replace any so where you're continuing with the same color and you don't want to do chain, a lot of the standing stitch options require pull up a long loop and then just start, which never really
I never managed to do that. I always tangled myself up, and then I think you managed at some point, and then I tried, and I was close to tears trying to figure it out. It was like, I can't do this, and then you found that other one, so I was forever thankful. But I'm also using it not just to join colors, I also use it as a starting point of a row when I add a color.
Because I do that too now, particularly if you're working something that's in back and forth rows that has edges, because the magic thing is by working the 2 single crochets on top of each other, you actually end up with sort of a fake chain up the side, which is really easy to then work your border into when you come around, because it looks like regular crochet stitches when you get to the side of the stitch. So yeah, the stacked standing crochet stitches, and you can make any size. So if you need to do a double, triple, treble, quadruple something or other, you just keep stacking up the single crochets until you get to the right height. And it looks really neat. And
we also have a tutorial for that on the blog, I think, with pictures.
Yes, yes.
And didn't you also take a YouTube video for it? I think.
Yeah, I did actually.
Yeah, as a video, because it's one of the things. Once you have it in your head, it works. But when you look at it on paper and in written, it's like.
Well, I can see that I'm going to have to go away and do my homework now and try both of those out, because it sounds like they're going to revolutionize my very poor attempts at crochet. Ladies, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much. I have learned so much today, and I'm really looking forward to the Bargello blankets or bedspreads or whatever they end up being called. Thank you very much. Goodbye from us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.